Marcus Chen pulled his torn jacket tighter around his shoulders as another gust of freezing wind tore through the abandoned subway tunnel. The blizzard outside had been raging for 3 days now, turning New York City into a frozen wasteland. Even the regular commuters had stopped using this old section of the underground, leaving Marcus completely alone with nothing but a few scraps of cardboard and his stubborn will to survive. His breath came out in white puffs as he huddled deeper into his makeshift shelter. The newspapers he had stuffed into his clothes crinkled with every movement, but they provided just enough insulation to keep hypothermia at bay. Marcus had been homeless for 2 years now, ever since the factory closed and took his job, his savings, and eventually his apartment. He had learned to endure things that would break most people. The sound of scraping metal echoed through the tunnel, followed by something that made Marcus freeze completely. It wasn't the usual sounds of the subway or even the storm above. This was different, heavy, deliberate, and it was getting closer. Marcus pressed himself against the cold concrete wall, trying to become invisible in the shadows. Street life had taught him that strange noises usually meant trouble, and trouble was something he couldn't afford right now. His heart pounded as the scraping grew louder, accompanied by what sounded like labored breathing. Then he saw it. A massive shape emerged from the darkness of the tunnel, moving slowly and deliberately. At first, Marcus thought his mind was playing tricks on him. The cold and hunger had made him see things before, but as the creature came closer, stepping into the dim light from a flickering emergency bulb, Marcus realized this was no hallucination. The dragon was enormous, easily 20 feet long from nose to tail, with scales that shifted from deep blue to silver in the pale light. Its wings were folded tightly against its body, and one of them appeared to be damaged, with several tears in the membrane. The creature's breathing was ragged, and it moved with obvious pain. Marcus held his breath, expecting the dragon to incinerate him on the spot or simply crush him with its massive claws. Instead, the creature stopped about 10 feet away and slowly lowered its great head to the ground. When it spoke, its voice was like distant thunder, but there was something unexpected in its tone. Exhaustion and desperation. "Human," the dragon said, its golden eyes fixed on Marcus. "I know you are there. I can smell your fear, but also your strength. I mean you no harm." Marcus couldn't move or speak. Dragons were supposed to be myths, stories from old books and movies. Yet here was one, talking to him in perfect English, in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath Manhattan. The dragon shifted slightly, wincing as it tried to adjust its injured wing. "I am dying," it continued, its voice growing weaker. "The storm above is not natural. It is a weapon created by my enemies, designed to freeze this world and everyone on it. I have been fighting it for days, but I cannot hold out much longer." "Your enemies?" Marcus finally managed to whisper, his voice cracking from disuse and shock. The dragon's eyes brightened slightly at his response. "The Void Collective. They consume worlds by freezing them first, making the inhabitants easier to harvest. Your planet is their next target. I came here to stop them, but I underestimated their power." Marcus stared at the creature, trying to process what he was hearing. Alien invaders, frozen worlds, a dragon fighting to save Earth. It sounded insane, but the evidence was right in front of him. The unnatural cold, the endless storm, and this injured being who claimed to be humanity's protector. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked, slowly standing up despite his shaking legs. "I'm nobody, just a homeless guy trying not to freeze to death." The dragon made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Nobody? You have survived 3 days in conditions that would kill most of your kind. You endure hardship that would break others. You are exactly the kind of human I need." The creature struggled to lift its head higher, and Marcus could see deep wounds along its neck and flanks. Whatever battle it had been fighting, it was losing badly. "I need shelter," the dragon said. "Somewhere warm where I can heal and plan my next move. In return, I offer you something your kind has never possessed. The truth about the universe and your place in it." Marcus looked around the cold, empty tunnel. His cardboard shelter wouldn't protect a dragon, and he had no resources to offer. But something about the creature's desperation reminded him of his own struggles. The dragon was asking for help, not demanding it. That alone was more respect than Marcus had received from anyone in months. "There's an old maintenance room about 50 yards down the tunnel," Marcus said slowly. "It has some electrical connections still working, and it's bigger than this space. The heating system might still function." The dragon's eyes flashed with what looked like gratitude. "You would help me, even though you have nothing to gain?" Marcus thought about that question. He had been invisible to society for so long that most people walked past him as if he didn't exist. But here was a being from another world, asking for his help and treating him like an equal. Maybe he did have something to gain after all. Everyone deserves a chance to fight for what matters to them, Marcus said, gathering his few possessions. Even dragons, apparently. As they made their way down the tunnel, the dragon moving slowly to accommodate its injuries, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The storm continued to rage above them, but for the first time in years, he wasn't facing it alone. The maintenance room was exactly as Marcus remembered it, larger than his previous shelter, with thick concrete walls and several electrical panels that still showed signs of life. The dragon barely fit through the doorway, but once inside, it collapsed with obvious relief. "This will do," the dragon said, its breathing becoming more regular. "Now, human, what is your name? If we are to work together, I should know what to call you." "Marcus," he replied, already working to activate the old heating system. "Marcus Chen." "I am Corvithus," the dragon said, watching Marcus with interest. "Guardian of the 73rd Sector, protector of emerging worlds, and currently the last hope your species has for survival." Marcus succeeded in coaxing some heat from the old radiators, and the room began to warm slightly. As he worked, he couldn't help but notice how the dragon watched him with something approaching respect. When was the last time anyone had looked at him that way? "So," Marcus said, sitting down across from the massive creature, "tell me about these Void Collective. What exactly are we up against?" Corvathus shifted into a more comfortable position, careful not to aggravate his wounds. "They are ancient beings who consume the life force of entire worlds. They prefer their prey to be helpless, so they freeze planets before harvesting them. The storm above is just the beginning. If it continues, your world will be dead within a week. And you're here to stop them?" "I was sent by the Galactic Preserve," Corvithus explained. "We protect emerging species from threats they cannot yet handle. Humanity shows great promise, but you are not yet advanced enough to defend yourselves against something like the Void Collective." Marcus absorbed this information slowly. The idea that Earth was being protected by some galactic organization was overwhelming, but it also explained why the dragon seemed so familiar with human nature and language. "What went wrong?" Marcus asked. "You said you underestimated them." Corvathus's expression grew grim. "The collective has grown stronger since our last encounter. They have learned to corrupt the very weather patterns of a world, turning the planet's own atmosphere against its inhabitants. I expected to face their ships and warriors, not battle the sky itself." The heating system finally kicked in properly, filling the room with warmth. Corvathus visibly relaxed as the temperature rose, and some color returned to his scales. "But now I understand something I did not before," the dragon continued, looking directly at Marcus. "The key to defeating them is not raw power. It is endurance, the ability to survive when everything seems hopeless. Your species possesses this quality in abundance, and you, Marcus Chen, are a perfect example of it." Marcus felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. For 2 years, he had simply been surviving, getting through each day without any real goal beyond seeing the next sunrise. Now, suddenly, he was part of something bigger than himself. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Corvathus smiled, revealing teeth that could easily bite through steel. "First, help me heal. Then, help me understand your people better. The collective thinks humanity will simply give up when things become difficult. We need to prove them wrong." As the storm continued to rage overhead, Marcus began to realize that his greatest strength wasn't his ability to survive harsh conditions. It was his refusal to give up, no matter how hopeless things seemed. And now, that strength might be exactly what was needed to save the world. The warmth of the room and the strange comfort of having someone to talk to made Marcus feel more human than he had in months. Tomorrow, he would learn more about the threat facing Earth. Tonight, for the first time in years, he wasn't alone in his fight for survival. Outside, the unnatural blizzard continued to pound New York City, but in the depths of the subway tunnel, an unlikely alliance was forming between a homeless man and a dragon. Neither of them knew it yet, but their partnership would become the foundation for humanity's greatest victory. Marcus woke to find Corvithus already awake, his golden eyes focused on something beyond the walls of their shelter. The dragon's wounds looked better in the improved light, though still serious. More importantly, His breathing was stronger and more regular than the night before. "The storm is changing," Corvathis said without looking at Marcus. "The collective is moving to the next phase of their plan." Marcus stood and stretched, feeling muscles that had grown accustomed to sleeping on concrete. "What's the next phase?" "Psychological warfare," the dragon replied grimly. "They will begin broadcasting despair directly into the minds of your people. Combined with the endless cold, it will break the spirit of most humans within days. Those who survive will be so demoralized that they will offer no resistance when the harvest begins." The heating system had kept the maintenance room comfortable through the night, but Marcus could feel the cold pressing against the walls, trying to get in. If it was this bad down here, he couldn't imagine what it was like on the surface. "But you said humans are good at enduring things," Marcus pointed out. "Won't some people fight back?" Corvathis turned his great head toward Marcus, and there was something like pride in his expression. "That is exactly what I am counting on. The collective has studied many species, but they have never encountered one quite like humanity. Most civilizations they harvest are either too primitive to understand what is happening, or too advanced to remember how to suffer productively." "Suffer productively?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Your species has a unique relationship with hardship," Corvathis explained, shifting to face Marcus fully. "Most beings either avoid suffering at all costs, or are crushed by it. Humans do something different. You endure it, learn from it, and use it to become stronger. The collective cannot understand this, which is why they underestimate you." Marcus thought about his own life over the past 2 years. The loss of his job, his home, his dignity, the nights spent cold and hungry, the days when people looked through him as if he didn't exist. He had wanted to give up many times, but something inside him had always refused to quit. "The problem," Corvathis continued, "is that most humans don't realize their own strength until it's too late. They need to be shown what they're capable of. And how do we do that?" The dragon's eyes gleamed with something that might have been mischief. "We start small. We find others who are already surviving impossible circumstances and show them they are not alone. Then we help them find others. Humans are social creatures. Your strength multiplies when you work together." Marcus understood immediately. "You want to organize the homeless population, among others?" "Yes. People who have already learned to survive when society has abandoned them. People who understand that giving up is not an option. People like you." The idea was both terrifying and exciting. Marcus had avoided contact with other homeless people for the most part, finding it easier to stay under the radar alone. But he knew there were others out there, fighting the same daily battles he was, and if Corvathis was right, they might be exactly the kind of people Earth needed right now. "There's a problem," Marcus said slowly. "Most people aren't going to believe a homeless guy who claims to be working with a dragon to save the world. They'll think I've lost my mind." Corvathis considered this. "Then we will need to be creative in how we approach them. Tell me, Marcus, what would convince someone in your situation to trust a stranger?" Marcus thought about it. "Food, warmth, shelter, and proof that you actually care about their survival, not just what they can do for you." "Excellent. And I can provide all of those things, once I have healed enough to use my abilities properly." Corvathis flexed his injured wing experimentally, wincing but managing to extend it slightly. "Dragon fire can warm entire buildings, and I know the locations of many food storage facilities throughout the city." "You're talking about stealing. I am talking about survival," Corvathis corrected firmly. "The collective storm will shut down all normal distribution systems within another day or two. Taking what is needed to keep people alive is not theft. It is necessity." Marcus had to admit the logic was sound. The normal rules of society didn't apply when society itself was under attack, and if the alternative was watching people freeze to death while waiting for help that might never come. "All right," Marcus said, "but we need to be smart about this. There are certain places where homeless people gather, especially in weather like this. If we can reach them with supplies and a plan, word will spread quickly." "Tell me about these places." For the next hour, Marcus shared everything he knew about the hidden communities that existed beneath the city's surface. Abandoned buildings where people squatted during the worst weather, steam tunnels that provided warmth, churches and shelters that opened their doors during emergencies. He painted a picture of a parallel society that most New Yorkers never saw, populated by people who had learned to survive through resourcefulness and mutual aid. Corvathis listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed his deep understanding of human nature. He seemed particularly interested in the informal networks that allowed information and resources to flow between different groups of homeless people. Your species' ability to form communities under the worst circumstances is remarkable, the dragon observed. Even when your larger society rejects individuals, they find ways to create smaller societies that accept them. This is exactly the foundation we need to build upon. The question is how to reach them without getting you killed, Marcus said. A dragon appearing in Central Park is going to attract a lot of attention, and not all of it friendly. Corvathus smiled that unsettling smile again. Who said anything about appearing in Central Park? Dragons have been masters of disguise for millennia. Watch. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. Corvathus's scales began to shift and change, taking on the appearance of rough human skin. His massive frame shrank and compressed until he stood about 6.5 feet tall, broad-shouldered and powerfully built. The dragon features smoothed into a face that was human but somehow still retained the intensity of his golden eyes. Impressive, Marcus said, though he could still sense something otherworldly about the transformed dragon. But the eyes are a giveaway. I can handle that, Corvathus said, and his eyes shifted to a more normal brown. This form will allow me to move among your people without causing panic. Together, we can begin building the resistance your world needs. The word resistance sent a thrill through Marcus. For the first time since he had lost everything, he felt like he was part of something that mattered, not just surviving, but fighting back against forces that would destroy everything he had ever known. There's something else, Marcus said. If we're going to convince people to fight, they need to understand what they're fighting for. Most homeless people have given up on the idea that society cares about them. Why should they risk their lives to save a world that has already rejected them? Corvathus was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that Marcus hadn't heard before. Because this is not about saving the society that rejected them, the dragon said. This is about saving the people they care about. The children who remind them of their own lost youth. The elderly who share their wisdom, despite having nothing else to give. The fellow survivors who offer food when they are hungry and warmth when they are cold. Marcus felt something shift inside him as he listened. Corvathus was right. The fight wasn't about preserving the system that had failed them. It was about protecting the human connections that made life worth living, even in the worst circumstances. Also, Corvathus continued, there is something the collective does not understand about your species. You do not fight hardest when you have the most to lose. You fight hardest when you have already lost everything and refuse to lose anything else. That resonated deeply with Marcus. He had nothing left to lose except his life, and that made him more dangerous, not less. The same would be true for many others in his situation. How long do we have? Marcus asked. The storm will intensify over the next 2 days, Corvathus replied, his form shifting back to his dragon appearance as he relaxed. By day 4, the psychological attacks will begin. We need to have our network in place by then, or the people we are trying to save will be too demoralized to fight. Marcus calculated quickly. 2 days to organize a resistance movement among some of the most distrustful people in the city. It seemed impossible. But then again, so did everything else that had happened in the last 24 hours. We'll need to split up, Marcus said. You can cover more ground in your human form, and I know the best routes through the underground. If we each take different areas of the city. No, Corvathus said firmly. We stay together. Trust is the most important resource we have right now, and trust must be built carefully. People need to see that we are truly working together, not just using each other. Marcus understood. A homeless man alone might be dismissed as crazy. A powerful stranger alone might be seen as threatening, but the two of them together, clearly supporting each other, would present a completely different picture. Then we start with the closest groups and work our way out, Marcus said. There's a place about half a mile from here where people gather during storms. If we can convince them, they'll help us reach others. Corvathus nodded, already beginning his transformation back to human form. And Marcus, he said as his features shifted, remember that what we are doing has never been done before. Humans and dragons have never fought side by side. If we succeed, we will not only save your world, we will change the galaxy's understanding of what your species is capable of. As they prepared to leave their shelter and venture into the storm, Marcus felt a strange sense of destiny settling over him. He had spent 2 years learning to survive as an individual. Now he would learn whether he could help his entire species do the same. The real battle for Earth was about to begin, and it would be won, or lost, not in the halls of power or the seats of government, but in the forgotten places where the forgotten people had learned to endure the impossible. And Marcus Chen, a man society had written off as worthless, was going to help lead the fight. The abandoned warehouse beneath the Manhattan Bridge had become the unlikely headquarters of Earth's resistance. What had started as a desperate alliance between Marcus and Corvathus had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. In just 3 days, they had assembled a network of nearly 200 people, all drawn from the city's forgotten population. Marcus stood before a group that would have seemed like misfits to any outside observer. There were homeless veterans who had learned survival in 2 different kinds of hell, runaway teenagers who had been living on the streets for years, elderly people who had fallen through society's safety net but retained the wisdom of age, immigrants without papers who had survived in the shadows of the city for decades. But Marcus no longer saw them as society's rejects. He saw them as Earth's secret weapon. The attacks start in 6 hours, he announced to the assembled crowd. The psychological warfare Corvathus had warned about was beginning. And even now, Marcus could feel a strange pressure at the edges of his mind, trying to convince him that all hope was lost. Remember what we talked about. The voices in your head telling you to give up are not your own thoughts. They're weapons being used against you. Corvathus, still in his human disguise, stepped forward. Over the past days, he had proven his worth to the group by providing exactly what he had promised: warmth, food, and shelter. But more than that, he had given them something most of them had never had: respect. He treated each person as a valuable ally, regardless of their circumstances. The Void Collective has made a critical error, Corvathus said, his voice carrying to every corner of the warehouse. They assume that despair and suffering will weaken you. But everyone in this room knows the truth. Suffering has made you stronger. It has taught you that you can endure anything. And that strength is about to save your world. An older woman named Rosa, who had been living in Central Park for 5 years, raised her hand. How do we fight something we can't see? These Void Collective creatures, where are they? Above the storm, Corvathus replied. Their harvest ships remain in orbit, protected by the weather system they have created. But they have a weakness. The psychic network they use to drain life force requires them to maintain a connection to the planet's surface. If we can disrupt that connection, their ships become vulnerable. A young man named Tommy, who had been part of a street gang before joining the resistance, spoke up. Disrupted how? Corvathus exchanged a look with Marcus. They had discussed this part of the plan extensively, and it was the most dangerous element of their strategy. The connection point is located directly beneath the eye of the storm, Corvathus explained. In Central Park, near the reservoir. The collective has established a psychic anchor there, a device that looks like a crystal formation about 10 feet tall. If we can destroy it, we break their connection to Earth. And how do we get to Central Park in the middle of the worst blizzard in history? Asked a veteran named Dave, who had lost his left arm in Afghanistan. Marcus smiled grimly. The same way we've been moving around the city for the past 3 days. Underground. The subway tunnels connect to storm drains and utility passages that run right under the park. We've been mapping the route since yesterday. But here's the real challenge, Corvathus continued. The moment we attack the anchor, every Void Collective agent on the planet will converge on that location. They can't afford to lose it. We'll be facing creatures that can freeze your blood with a touch and drain your life force just by looking at you. The warehouse fell silent as the magnitude of the task settled over the group. They were being asked to face supernatural enemies with nothing but their will to survive, and whatever improvised weapons they could find. It was Rosa who broke the silence. So what? I've been facing things trying to kill me for 5 years. Cold, hunger, disease, people who see me as less than human. If I can survive all that, I can survive some space monsters too. Her words triggered a wave of agreement from the crowd. These were people who had already faced death and refused to submit to it. The idea of one more fight, even against impossible odds, didn't frighten them the way it might have frightened others. There's something else, Marcus added. Corvathus has been teaching us about human potential. Things our species can do that we've never realized. When we work together, when we support each other, we become more than the sum of our parts. The collective has studied individual humans, but they've never seen what we can accomplish when we refuse to abandon each other. Over the past days, Marcus had witnessed something remarkable. As the resistance network grew, people who had been isolated and struggling alone began to thrive when they became part of something larger. Their creativity, determination, and resourcefulness multiplied when they had others to fight alongside. "The plan is simple," Corvathis said. "We move through the tunnels in small groups. Each group has a specific role. Some will create diversions to draw the collective's attention away from the anchor. Others will establish escape routes and safe houses. The core team, led by Marcus and myself, will destroy the psychic anchor." "And then what?" Tommy asked. "Then we prove that humanity cannot be harvested," Marcus replied. "When the anchor is destroyed, the collective ships will be forced to descend into the atmosphere to maintain their connection to the planet. That's when they become vulnerable to conventional weapons. That's when your governments and militaries can finally fight back effectively." The psychological pressure Marcus had been feeling intensified suddenly, and he could see others in the crowd react to it as well. The collective was beginning their final assault on human morale, trying to convince every person on Earth that resistance was futile. But something unexpected happened. Instead of weakening the resolve of the resistance fighters, the psychic attack seemed to strengthen their determination. These were people who had heard voices telling them they were worthless, hopeless, and better off dead. They had learned to recognize such thoughts as lies and fight back against them. "You feel that?" Marcus called out to the crowd. "That voice telling you to give up? That's not your voice. That's the enemy, afraid of what you represent. They're trying to break you because they know you're the key to their defeat." A chorus of defiant shouts rose from the assembled group. People who had been beaten down by life were refusing to be beaten down by aliens. The collective had made the same mistake that human society had made. They had underestimated the strength that comes from having nothing left to lose. "It's time," Corvathis announced, beginning his transformation back to dragon form. "The storm is reaching its peak intensity. If we're going to move, it has to be now." The groups began to organize themselves according to the plan they had rehearsed. Each person knew their role and understood the importance of timing. As Marcus watched them prepare, he felt a profound sense of pride. These weren't society's failures anymore. They were Earth's champions. The journey through the tunnels was treacherous but not impossible. The resistance fighters moved with the skill of people who had learned to navigate the city's hidden spaces out of necessity. They avoided the flooding in lower passages, found warmth in areas where steam pipes were still functional, and helped each other through sections where debris blocked the way. When they finally reached the access point beneath Central Park, the full intensity of the collective's presence became clear. The air itself seemed thick with malevolent energy, and every step toward the surface required a conscious act of will. The psychological attacks were constant now, a barrage of despair and futility that would have stopped most people in their tracks. But the resistance fighters pressed on, supporting each other when the psychic pressure became too intense to bear alone. Marcus realized that this was what Corvathis had meant about human potential. Individually, they might have been overwhelmed. Together, they were unstoppable. The psychic anchor stood in a clearing near the reservoir, exactly as Corvathis had described. It looked like a massive crystal growth, pulsing with an eerie blue light that seemed to drain warmth from the air around it. Creatures that hurt to look at directly moved around its base, their forms shifting between solid matter and something that might have been living shadow. "Remember," Corvathis whispered, now in his full dragon form, "the anchor is just a machine. It can be destroyed by conventional means, but the moment we attack it, everything the collective has on this planet will try to stop us." Marcus looked around at his companions. There were 12 of them in the core assault team, each one someone who had learned to face impossible odds with nothing but determination and the support of others who understood their struggle. "For everyone who said we didn't matter," Marcus said quietly. "For everyone who looked through us like we were invisible. For everyone who gave up on us. For the world that doesn't know it needs us," Rosa added. "For the future we're going to give them whether they deserve it or not," Dave concluded. The attack began with Corvathis unleashing a stream of dragon fire directly at the crystal formation. The psychic anchor began to crack immediately, its blue light flickering and changing to an angry red. The Void Collective creatures reacted instantly, converging on the assault team with inhuman speed. What followed was the strangest battle in human history. Homeless veterans used military tactics learned in distant wars to outmaneuver creatures from another dimension. Street kids who had learned to run from gangs used those same skills to stay ahead of beings that could freeze them with a touch. Elderly survivors who had lived through decades of hardship proved that experience and cunning could overcome supernatural strength, and through it all, they protected each other. When one person fell to the collective psychic attacks, others would shield them until they recovered. When someone was overwhelmed by multiple enemies, the rest of the team would rally to their defense. They fought not as individuals but as a unified force, each person's strength adding to the whole. The psychic anchor began to collapse under the sustained assault, its crystalline structure cracking and crumbling. With each break in its surface, the collective psychic pressure decreased, and the resistance fighters found themselves growing stronger rather than weaker. Finally, with a sound like breaking glass amplified 1,000 times, the anchor shattered completely. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The storm above began to dissipate, the unnatural cold started to fade, and the oppressive weight of the collective's presence lifted from the earth. In orbit, the Void Collective harvest ships found themselves vulnerable for the first time in centuries. Human military forces around the world, no longer hampered by the psychic interference, launched coordinated strikes that drove the invaders back into deep space. But the real victory was happening in Central Park, where 12 people who society had forgotten were celebrating the fact that they had saved the world. They had proven Corvathis right about human nature, and they had proven themselves wrong about their own worth. As the sun broke through the dissipating clouds for the first time in days, Marcus looked around at his companions and realized that they would never be the same, not because they had gained anything material, but because they had discovered something about themselves that no one could ever take away. They mattered. They had always mattered. And now the entire galaxy would know it. Corvathis, still in dragon form but healing rapidly, now that the collective's influence was gone, approached Marcus with something that might have been tears in his ancient eyes. "The Galactic Preserve will want to meet with your resistance fighters," the dragon said. "What you have accomplished here will change how the universe sees humanity. You have shown that your species' greatest strength is not in your technology or your weapons, but in your refusal to abandon each other when everything seems hopeless." Marcus smiled, feeling the warmth of the returning sun on his face. "Does that mean we get some kind of reward?" "You get something better than a reward," Corvathis replied. "You get recognition. Your world is no longer classified as an emerging civilization under protection. As of today, humanity is considered a full partner in the galactic community, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." Looking around at his friends, Marcus realized that the real reward was something else entirely. For the first time in years, he belonged somewhere. He was part of something that mattered, and so was everyone else who had been written off by the world they had just saved. The age of humanity hiding in Earth's shadows was over. The age of humanity standing proudly in the galaxy's light had begun, and it had all started with a homeless man who refused to give up, and a dragon who recognized the strength that comes from having nothing left to lose.